If you've ever really thought about the logistics of your own body, you run into this massive biological conflict pretty quickly.
Hmm.
After you eat a meal rich in fat, your system is just flooded with these big water-insoluble energy molecules, triacylglycerols and cholesterol.
Right.
But the entire circulatory system is this huge, watery highway of blood plasma. It's oil and water on a grand, dangerous scale.
Exactly. And the body can't just rely on, mixing and hoping for the best. It needs a really sophisticated transport system.
And that's what we're here to talk about.
The elegant solution is the lipoprotein. I mean, you can imagine a microscopic delivery truck that's designed specifically to navigate this watery environment.
Okay.
It takes all those nonpolar lipids, the triacylglycerol, the cholesterol esters, and basically just stuffs them into a waterproof core.
And the really clever engineering is all on the surface.
It is. That nonpolar core is then encased by this single layer of amphipathic lipids, phospholipids, and free cholesterol.
And those have the polar ends that face out.
Precisely. So they interact happily with the water, and it makes the entire package completely water-miscible. You add a few crucial protein ID tags, and you get a functional complex transport unit.
Okay, so let's unpack this system, because lipoproteins aren't just passive trucks, right? They mediate the entire cycle of lipid use, storage, redistribution, everything.
The whole anabolic and catabolic cycle, yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive is to trace the complete life cycle of these vehicles, understand how they're regulated, and I think most importantly, see why their malfunction is directly implicated in diseases like atherosclerosis and, the silent epidemic of fatty liver disease.
This is really foundational biochemistry, and the clinical stakes are so high. When the system gets out of balance, what we call hyperlipoproteinemias, we see major pathology.
Like in diabetes.
Think about diabetes mellitus. Insulin deficiency is like throwing two metabolic wrenches into the works. You get excessive mobilization of free fatty acids from your storage.
Right.
And at the same time, you get underutilization of key lipoproteins like VLDL. So the end result is severe hypertriacylglycerolemia.
Just way too much fat swimming around in the plasma.
Way too much, unchecked.
So before we put these trucks on the road, let's look inside the cargo hold. The majority of the cargo is split between phospholipids and cholesterol esters.
Right.
But what often gets overlooked is that tiny fraction of lipids that don't need this massive packaging.
You're talking about the unesterified, long-chain free fatty acids, or FFAs.
Exactly.
They only make up about 4% of plasma lipids, but despite that small number, they are by far the most metabolically active fraction.
And they get a different ride.
A totally different ride. They are so critical they aren't carried by a lipoprotein at all. They just rely on the ubiquitous serum albumin to ferry them through the blood.
That's a perfect contrast. So back to our main packages. The structure is generally the same, that nonpolar core, the amphipathic surface.
Yeah.
But their cargo, size, and function vary wildly. So we classify them by density, which is inversely related to how much lipid they're carrying.
The more fat, the lighter and bigger they are.
Right.
So let's run through the four main groups. First, you have the behemoths, Chylomicron.
The biggest ones.
The largest, lowest density, packing almost 99% lipid.
Okay.
They're made exclusively in the intestine, and their one and only job is to transport dietary lipids, the fat you just ate.
Okay, so number 2 would be the VLDLs, very low density lipoproteins.
Right. These are the liver's export trucks. When the liver synthesizes its own lipids, say from excess carbs, it packages them into VLDL to deliver them out to the body.
Third in the sequence are the breakdown products of VLDL.
The LDL.
Low-density lipoproteins, yeah. And these are now cholesterol-rich particles. They've shifted from delivering massive energy loads to delivering the structural component of cholesterol to tissues outside the liver.
Which is why we watch them so closely in the clinic. That's exactly why. And finally, you have the smallest and most dense, sort of the metabolic cleanup crew, HDL, high-density lipoprotein.
The good cholesterol.
That's the one. It's rich in phospholipids and cholesterol, and it performs that critical task of reverse cholesterol transport. It's basically scraping excess cholesterol from cells.
But none of these packages would know where to go or how to drop off their cargo without the proteins attached to them.
The apolipoproteins, they're the keys, the ID tags, the enzyme regulators, everything.
So how many jobs are we talking about here?
Primarily three really essential ones. First is just structure. ApoB is a big one here. It literally holds the particle together.
Okay.
Second, there are enzyme cofactors or inhibitors.
Mm.
So for example, ApoCCS is an absolute requirement for the main fat-clearing enzyme, LPL. ApoAI activates LCAT, which is for cholesterol cleaning. And then ApoC3 actually inhibits LPL.
So they turn things on and off, and the third role.
The third is they function as receptor ligands. They're the tags that let a cell recognize and grab the particle. ApoB100 and ApoE are the classic examples that bind to the LDL receptor.
That structural role of ApoB leads to one of the most, I think, surprising examples of genetic editing in the body. The liver makes this huge protein, ApoB100,
Right.
but the intestine makes a truncated version, ApoB48. Why is that functional difference so important?
Oh, it's a masterpiece of regulation. The difference is a process called RNA editing. The liver makes the full-length B100. The intestine, though, uses a specific enzyme to stick a stop codon right in the middle of the ApoB mRNA, cutting it short to B48.
And the functional reason for that is?
Here's the why. ApoB100 is the ligand for the LDL receptor in the liver. If chylomicrons had that full ligand, the liver would just clear them immediately, before they ever had a chance to deliver their dietary fuel to muscle and fat tissue.
Ah, so it's a delivery pass.
It's a free pass. By truncating it to B48, the intestine ensures that dietary fat gets to circulate and reach the peripheral tissues first.
Let's follow those two main delivery vehicles then. Chylomicrons for dietary fat and VLDL for liver-exported fat. They get secreted as nascent particles, so they're, functionally incomplete?
That's a great way to put it. They're like cars without their keys. They have to acquire their full working ID tags, specifically ApoC and ApoE, after they get into the circulation by interacting with HDL.
But the core protein, ApoB, has to be there from the start.
It has to be integral from the very beginning. That's why a rare genetic inability to make ApoB, called apolipoproteinemia, leads to this massive lipid buildup inside the cells. The particles can't even get secreted.
So these massive fuel trucks are circulating. How does the body actually stop them and offload the cargo?
That is the job of lipoprotein lipase, or OPL.
Yeah.
This is the central enzyme for clearance.
And it's not just floating around, right?
No, that's the key. It's stationary. It's anchored to the endothelium of capillary walls, strategically placed in tissues that need energy, like adipose tissue, cardiac muscle, and skeletal muscle.
And what does it need to get to work?
It needs that ApoCCC tag, the one the lipoprotein just got from HDL. Once it binds, LPL just starts hydrolyzing the triacylglycerol inside the particle into free fatty acids and glycerol.
And where do those products go?
The fatty acids are immediately taken up by the tissue right there for fuel or for storage. The glycerol, well, most peripheral tissues can't use it because they lack an enzyme called glycerol kinase, so it circulates back to the liver or kidney.
This is where that idea of biological prioritization comes in, right? The Michaelis constant, the chimera.
Exactly. So the kRm is basically the concentration you need for the enzyme to work at half speed. The LPL in the heart has a very low epinephrine triacylglycerol.
Meaning it's very efficient.
Extremely efficient. It means the heart's LPL will grab fatty acids even when the plasma concentration is super low, like during starvation. The heart gets priority.
And on the flip side?
On the flip side, LPL synthesis in your fat cells is boosted by insulin. That's the signal that energy is abundant and the storage depots should be open for business.
So once LPL has stripped away, say, 70 to 90% of the TG, the particles are way smaller. They give their ApoC back to HDL, and we're left with remnants.
We're left with remnants.
Yeah.
Chylomicron remnants, which are now rich in cholesterol from your diet, and VLDL remnants, which we call IDL.
And now the liver, which ignored the chylomicrons at first, steps in.
Now the liver plays cleanup. Chylomicron remnants are recognized and pulled in almost entirely by their ApoE tag using the LDL receptor and another one called LRP1. It's a really crucial clearance mechanism.
Okay, what about the IDL, the VLDL remnants? It has a dual fate, right?
It does. IDL has two major paths. It can be cleared by the liver, again using the LDL receptor, binding through either its ApoB100 or ApoE, or, and this is a really important point for humans, a big chunk of it undergoes further metabolism while it's still circulating, and it eventually transforms into LDL.
So VLDL becomes LDL?
One VLDL particle makes one LDL particle. This secondary conversion step is a major reason why humans have much higher concentrations of LDL than a lot of other mammals.
And that shift from IDL to LDL brings us squarely to cholesterol delivery. LDL's whole mission is to deliver cholesterol to cells that need it. It uses its ApoB100 to bind to the LDL receptor.
And this is where the clinical narrative gets very intense.
Yeah.
We know that high plasma concentrations of LDL cholesterol are strongly correlated with atherosclerosis. About 70% of LDL is degraded in the liver, but that other 30% is out delivering its cargo.
Sure.
If there's too much LDL or the receptors aren't working right, the system gets saturated.
And the excess cholesterol starts building up in arterial walls.
Exactly.
So we desperately need a counter mechanism, some kind of metabolic cleanup crew, and that is the HDL cycle, or reverse cholesterol transport.
RCT is the process of removing excess cholesterol from peripheral tissues and hauling it back to the liver to be excreted, either as cholesterol itself or converted into bile acids. It is absolutely protective.
Walk us through how HDL manages this.
Okay, so HDL is made by the liver and intestine as this sort of flattened discoidal particle. We call it nascent HDL. The moment it starts collecting free cholesterol from cell membranes, it has to process it. It uses an enzyme called LCAT, which gets activated by its ApoAI tag.
What does LCAT do?
LCAT takes that free cholesterol and turns it into a nonpolar cholesterol ester. This nonpolar molecule then dives into the core of the particle, which transforms the flat disk into a sphere, a functional HDL3.
So that structural change is key to holding the cargo. But how does it get the cells to give up their cholesterol in the first place?
Well, HDL acts as an acceptor. It just pulls cholesterol out of the cell membrane, but it relies on specific transporters on the cell surface. The big ones are ABCA1 and ABCG1 and the SRB1 receptor.
Interesting.
And it's actually the earliest form, pre-HDL. That's the most potent acceptor. It's like the empty truck that can grab the most cargo right at the start.
And once it's full and becomes what's called HDL2, it gets recycled.
Yes. HDL2 can deliver its cholesterol ester cargo selectively to the liver via that same SRB1 receptor. Or other enzymes can hydrolyze some of its lipids to regenerate the smaller HDL3, sending it back out to keep collecting.
A self-sustaining cleaning loop.
It is. And that efficiency is why HDL2 concentrations are universally and inversely related to the incidence of atherosclerosis.
The liver really is the metabolic nexus here for everything.
It truly is. It synthesizes and oxidizes fatty acids, it does ketogenesis, makes bile, and it's the absolute primary site for regulating all plasma lipoproteins. If the liver is sick, the whole system just breaks down.
Let's focus on its export job, VLDL. The chapter outlines this crucial two-step process to get it secreted. What does that assembly line look like?
The non-negotiables are ApoB100 synthesis and a source of TG. The first lipidation step happens in the ER, and it's facilitated by a protein called MTP.
MTP.
Microsomal triacylglycerol transfer protein. This forms a small initial VLDL precursor called VLDL2. That small particle then moves to the Golgi and fuses with these big pre-made TG-rich lipid droplets to form the massive VLDL1 that actually gets secreted.
So it's not a single step.
No, and the fusion step is really tightly regulated, which shows how controlled this whole process is.
And what throws the main switch on VLDL secretion? What turns it up?
A few things. The fed state, high-carb diets, high circulating free fatty acids, and alcohol. But the critical physiological brake on this whole process is insulin.
Ah, so insulin slows it down.
Insulin acts to suppress VLDL secretion. It inhibits both the synthesis of ApoB100 and that essential fusion step in the Golgi. It's the body's way of saying, hey, energy's in storage, liver, you don't need to export more.
And when that suppression fails, or when the TG input just overwhelms the export capacity, that's when we get fatty liver disease. Steatosis.
Yes. NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It is the most common liver disorder worldwide now.
And that imbalance is the cause.
That imbalance creates the pathology. We usually look at two types of failure. Type 1 is the most common. It's an input-output problem. The liver is just getting such a huge influx of FFAs like obesity or insulin resistance that VLDL production can't keep up.
The fat just accumulates.
It accumulates. And type 2, that's when there's a direct metabolic block in the machinery itself. Maybe ApoB synthesis fails, or you have a deficiency of something like choline, or drug interferes with the process. The export trucks just can't be built.
And then there's the specific case of alcohol, alcoholic fatty liver disease.
ALD is driven by the fact that when you oxidize ethanol, you generate massive amounts of excess NADH.
Okay.
And this high NADH to NAD plus ratio profoundly inhibits the oxidation of fatty acids in the liver. So if you can't burn the fat, your only choice is to esterify it into triacylglycerol. And when that gets overwhelmed, you get rapid, massive TG accumulation.
Okay, let's shift gears to the ultimate storage site, adipose tissue.
Right, the main triacylglycerol repository. But it's constantly active, always cycling through lipolysis and reesterification. And we now know it has this critical endocrine role, secreting adipokines.
Like leptin and adiponectin.
Precisely. Leptin is key for long-term energy balance and signaling satiety. It basically tells the brain, we're full. Adiponectin is a fascinating one. It modulates glucose and lipid metabolism and also enhances insulin sensitivity.
Now, you mentioned a core biochemical limitation in adipose tissue. It lacks glycerol kinase.
Right.
So if the tissue can't reuse glycerol to repackage fatty acids, how does it manage reesterification?
This is a major regulatory point. The glycerol 3-phosphate it needs to reesterify fatty acids back into triacylglycerol must be derived from glucose through glycolysis.
So glucose is the gatekeeper for fat storage.
It's the absolute gatekeeper. If your insulin is low, glucose uptake drops, G3P production stops, and any fatty acids released from lipolysis can't be recaptured. They just flow back into the plasma.
That perfectly sets up the hormonal control system, which is centered on hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL, which is different from LPL.
Totally different enzyme, yeah. HSL is the enzyme inside the fat cell that breaks down stored fat, and its activity is exquisitely controlled.
So what's the off switch?
Insulin is the key inhibitor. It decreases FFA release by lowering HSL activity, and at the same time it boosts glucose uptake to provide that G3P for reesterification. It's the ultimate store and save signal.
And what triggers the release energy now response?
Hormones that signal high energy demand epinephrine or norepinephrine, glucagon. They promote lipolysis. They stimulate adenylyl cyclase, which raises KMP levels, and KMP activates a protein kinase,
Which then activates HSL.
which then phosphorylates and activates HSL.
And what about that protein you mentioned, the one that wraps the lipid droplets? Paralipin. It sounds like a metabolic bodyguard.
That is exactly the right analogy. Paralipin covers the lipid droplets, and under normal conditions, it inhibits lipolysis by just blocking HSL from getting to the fat.
Okay.
But when those mobilization hormones signal, paralipin itself gets phosphorylated. This removes the inhibition and allows the now activated HSL to get in there and cleave the stored triacylglycerol. It's a flawless system.
We have to finish with a quick look at that specialized tissue designed for, well, for heat. Brown adipose tissue, or BAT.
BAT is fascinating. Its whole purpose is thermogenesis, non-shivering heat generation. It has these incredibly high levels of mitochondria and cytochromes, which is what gives it its color.
And its mechanism is basically short-circuiting the power plant.
That's a great way to describe it. It relies on a unique protein in the inner mitochondrial membrane called UCP1, or thermogenin.
UCP1.
So while a respiratory chain is busy building a proton gradient, the normal step before making ATP UCP1 acts as a leak. It's a proton conductance pathway. It lets the protons flow back down the gradient without going through ATP synthase.
So the energy doesn't get trapped as ATP.
Right. Instead of being trapped as chemical energy, that energy from the gradient is immediately dissipated as heat.
It's sacrificing efficiency for temperature control. And since BAT activity is inversely related to body fat, this is a huge therapeutic target for obesity, isn't it?
Absolutely. Finding ways to activate or even increase the mass of B8 is one of the most promising avenues in metabolic research right now.
Wow.
This deep dive has really shown us the complexity, but also the elegance of lipid transport. So to recap, lipoproteins are these essential packages. You have chylomicrons and VLDL as the main triacylglycerol delivery services.
TG delivery.
LDL is the cholesterol courier, and HDL is running that critical reverse cholesterol transport, the body's protective cleanup crew. The liver is the ultimate regulator of it all, and adipose tissue storage and release is governed minute by key hormones, especially insulin.
Which links fat storage directly to glucose availability.
It all comes together.
And here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. We established that ApoAIV, one of those important surface proteins, plays a role in regulating satiety and glucose homeostasis. Given how central lipid transport is to our overall health, if scientists could develop future therapies that specifically target the activity of this one single apolipoprotein, how might that radically change our ability to treat complex, interrelated diseases like obesity and type 2 diabetes at the same time?
A question that connects biochemistry directly to tomorrow's medicine. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into lipid transport and storage.